for an area variance before the Zoning Board of Appeals that has been referred to the Planning Board for recommendation. And the Planning Board declared themselves lead agency with respect to seeker. And we have been going through seeker for a period of time, addressing various concerns during the process, supplementing the information to the board to address those concerns. Since the last meeting, well, where we left off with the review, from my recollection of the of seeker, was part 2, went through all. I think we got to the last 2 questions, and there were some questions and concerns with respect to those. Since that meeting, we have revised the ZBA application to refine it per the app, to adjust it to the plans so that they match up properly. There's some minor differences in square footage. We wanted to be correct on that. We also refined and supplemented the answers to the 5 questions, the responses to the 5 questions that were required by statute to address. We also did the same thing with seeker part 1. We corrected or refined that to, again, match with the plans. Square footages were slightly off in the paperwork versus the plans that we had been working through. So we corrected that. We supplemented some of the responses, and then we added a section F, which is, for those of you that haven't gone through this before, section F is a expansion on responses to part 1. So in part 1, you have something like part 2, like Matt has up here right now. You have questions that you have to either fill in the blanks or answers to, and then there's just frankly not enough area to answer the questions fully. We felt per the questions that the board had come up with along the way. So those are the changes since we last met. The biggest difference is the part F. We've kind of added, to begin with, a more or less transmittal, if you will, of materials that had been submitted that Matt had done in a previous letter that he had covered to the board. That's been copied and pasted right into section F. And then we also referred to or referenced the environmental summary letter, which was quite extensive, if you recall, from one of our meetings, from Deborah Wright of Ramble to the planning board, that addressed the environmental concerns and questions. Under section C, planning and zoning, C2, adopted land use plans, going specifically to part 1 of seeker. We reviewed the comprehensive plan. We reviewed the commercial design guidelines. Both documents were adopted by the village. Only one of them is actually a land planning document, but the other one is quite helpful in defining some of the characteristics of the neighborhood. We outline all of the items that were part of the focus area of the comprehensive plan for 547 East Genesee Street. There were 4 key issues. There were 6 strategies that were identified. I can go through all of those in a few minutes here, but and then we also supplemented beyond that with some other items that addresses the concerns. As you can see from what Matt has up here right now, consistency with community plans, just to kind of rehash what typically happens here. The first question is asked, is the proposed action, in this instance, it's kind of almost a double negative. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. You answer no or yes, and then you go below and answer those questions to determine any significance or what level of significance there is for those specific questions that seeker asks. The relevant answers to those questions are referenced under relevant Part 1 questions, as you can see, C2, C3, D1A, et cetera, under 17A. That's where you reference the answers to the question that it poses. For those, again, that may not be familiar with how this works. So what we have done is actually go through this. We have made sure we understand what the questions are, and gave information to help the board make their decisions based on the project that's being proposed, and what the tests are for the questions. So that being said, Matt, if you want to go back to slide 3, that'll show, this is the site plan that we had most recently proposed. Obviously, this is a site plan. This is not a ZBA request. So, typical comments or questions regarding the site plan, certainly we can address to a degree, but frankly, we're dealing with a ZBA referral, and we're dealing with seeker significance of impacts. Has to be obviously based on something. This is what it's based on. The specifics of this particular site plan are what we have presented to the board and have given backup for, such as the traffic impact study, the stormwater pollution prevention plan, grading plan, a number of other things that are, at the seeker level, very intense background information. So I believe we've answered virtually everything to get to a determination on seeker, and addressed impacts, which again we can go through. But Matt, if you want to flip to the next page, that's the next slide is the grading plan, how things work. As you can see, what we're trying to do is, and again, a reminder to the board and those that are listening in, the property is about 32 acres in size, almost split 50-50, roughly 15 acres of industrial zone in the front and roughly 15 acres of residential zone to the rear. We are proposing access to the rear via the roadways that are part of the project to access the 3 components of the project, but also to a trailhead at the back of the property to provide parking for folks of the village to park their bikes, walk to or drive to, park and walk through the residentially zoned land that we propose to provide access to for the village residents for passive recreation. What the village decides to do with it is completely up to them. If they want to put in, hiking trails to connect over to Green Lakes, which would make a lot of sense based on comprehensive plan. Also, bike riding trails, great use for that area as well. I know there's some deer in there because we've been asked by the village every hunting season if they could call the herd in there. Not we, but the sellers of the property to us have been asked that. So that's what our intent is of that land to the north. So that kind of coincides with one of the comments that the county had made in their review of site plan, subdivision, and area variance. They were consistent with all 3 of their comment letters that there be some coordination with potential passive recreation for that area, which we took to heart. Kind of bringing back everybody to this plan, the thing that we have been focused on, it appears most of the time, has been the larger building in the plan, which is roughly 56,000 square feet for a grocery store. That building is set back roughly 500 feet from the street. The current building that exists on the street is actually in dotted line underneath that Matt's showing there. It's about 206 feet or 210 feet from the street. And there is a big gap between it and the road. We're infilling that gap, that kind of missing tooth of the streetscape, with the 3,500 square foot building out front, which we frankly haven't talked about to our detriment. And I apologize that we haven't focused on that, because that's a critical element for the overall campus development we have here. And that is, it fills in that streetscape. The building is set back equidistant to the existing building to our east, which is the accounting office, Hall and Dieter office there. It's of a size, scale, and visual to fill in and match with that type of facility. Parking's to the side and rear of that building. We do have, again, to reiterate past discussions, through DOT's review and subsequent initial approval. This is all pending our actual roadway permit application, is the installation of a traffic signal. That was aligned at this location at DOT's request, because it may eventually connect over to another road and provide a better traffic downstream to the west. We have a new center turn lane that's being added to the development, as again DOT requested. But back to the signal, there's a few things associated with it. It's to connect us with the gas station to our west, and also provide a main access point for the development. It's a signalized intersection with safe means of crossing the street for pedestrians, which does not exist until you get to the signal further to the west. So right now, everybody that's walking on the east or west side of the street has no safe means to cross. That's including those that go to the senior center, which is across the street. Those folks have no safe means to walk across to either the church or the post office, or what we're proposing to be a grocery store. These are all community services that are very important to seniors as well as other folks, obviously, but they have no safe means of getting there as a pedestrian currently. That kind of gives a refresher course on the site plan and what we're proposing to do. Matt, if you want to advance, let's see what I have on my screen here. Okay. We have these two slides, which we can kind of go through in a few minutes here, but let's go, let's talk about community character. So fortunately, there is a land use, an adopted land use plan that the village adopted back in 2014, which is their comprehensive plan, which was an update from 2008. There is a focal area that comprehensive plan, that our site is actually one of the focal areas that the comprehensive plan addressed. And as I mentioned previously, there were 4 issues identified: underutilized developable land, large setback from the East Genesee Street. It's a transitional space between the upper business district and eastern residential areas. And there's a potential increase in traffic congestion as a result of a change in use. Those are the 4 items that were identified. And then there were 6 strategies that were identified in addressing this property. One was allowing flexibility in use, but not in character. Another one was ensuring access management through shared driveways and parking lots, coordinate entranceway with potential redevelopment on the south side of East Genesee Street, which is exactly why the traffic signal was proposed where it is per Department of Transportation, and future thoughts with connection over to Salt Springs Road, frankly, to alleviate the problems down at what where the Park and Triangle are to the west. Require landscape islands within the parking lots whenever possible. We've done that not only as a buffer from the street behind the building out front, but also within the development. Encourage development patterns compatible in scale and form with adjacent residential areas. It's important to note that well, first of all, the 3,500 square foot building does that. It fills in the missing tooth of the streetscape, which is critical. And that's one of the items that's discussed in, frankly, the design guidelines. But the residential areas are actually about 2/3 of the way back into the site. That's where they are to the east and to the west of the site. They're not really along the frontage of the site. Yeah, you can see that there. That's about halfway on that side, and it's further back on the west side. Buffer visual impacts of trees and other vegetation between East Genesee Street and the new development. That's exactly what we're proposing to do right there, as well as, yep, there, and then with the building out front and the vegetation around it. That's the addressing of the comprehensive plan. The section F actually gets into it a little deeper. But Matt, if you want to go to slide 7, a couple more. There you go. So this is our neighborhood. This is as you're approaching from the west towards the east. This is the neighboring Circle K. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is Circle K's kind of entrance here on the left, and then the entrance to our property right to the right of that pole there that you see. That's basically where the traffic light would be, is in that location. So that Circle K would then be at a signalized intersection as well, which would be advantageous to them. The hopes is that they may shut this particular entrance off because they'll have access to a signal, but unfortunately for DOT, they can't force that, frankly. But this is the existing building set back off the street, about 210 feet. This was taken just this past weekend, actually Friday. You can see the beautiful vista of the building, the lovely patina, and then the reflective glass on the former office section of the existing building. You want to go to the next slide, Matt? This is the accounting office that is in front of the site. That site actually kind of wraps, so you can see it's appears to be a converted home. That's the kind of scale that we're trying to meet and match with our 3,500 square foot building to fill in that gap to its west. If you want to go back one slide, Matt, you can see that whole frontage there. Maybe one more back. Might be able to see, no, two more back. One more back. There you go. Now you can see it better. Yeah, it's over in there on the other side of that tree. So we'd be filling in that kind of that gap in the streetscape. Again, with the same setback as the accounting office. If you want to keep going down the street there, Matt. Next one. This is across the street. This is the Tracy building. Tracy Lumber across the road, and the facility next to it. This is out right at the street. This is our neighborhood as it exists today. If you want to go one more slide. And this to the right there, right at this point would be potentially, well, this would be where our traffic light would align, is this point here. That's the Honda dealership that was recently built. Big wall right there that you can see as you come to the entrance of the village. And then their parking display area to its east. Well done, but a lot of cars parked right there along the street, right across the street from our property. So this is the character of the neighborhood as you see it today. We're planning to improve that character of neighborhood, provide safe access across the street for folks to access the senior center, to and from the senior center, to our project, which would be the grocery store a seniors facility and the 3,500 square foot building out front. You'd also have now access to the post office on foot and the church as well, again, at a safe pedestrian crossing that does not currently exist. If you want to go, I think that covers the project neighborhood.
Yeah, that was the last one on that.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to scoot to the next slide?
Yeah, if you want, let me take over and let you get a drink of water, Devin. Just so the planning board knows, what we've done is we've created a model of the proposed conditions. The model of that proposed conditions tries to show that grocery component, and as well models in the Circle K, the Hall and Dieter accounting office, and then some unknown building of that 3,500 square foot that we talked about. The purpose of this slide really is to kind of show the detail of this SketchUp model. And we can take this three-dimensional model, we can spin it, we can take a look at it. The beauty of this is this particular picture is what I call a helicopter view. We're about 150 feet in the air looking down on this property. No one's going to see it like this. No one's going to see it like this, just like they can't see the plan view that we've been always showing. So what we've done through the three-dimensional model, and I'm sure that Joanne and Jane are familiar with SketchUp from their professionalism, is we can then bring that 150-foot helicopter view and bring it right down to the street. So now in this three-dimensional model, we can see what this proposed condition is going to look like once it's built. So in that case, that three-dimensional model is showing that Circle K. And if we go back to that real life picture, we can see the overhead awning over the fuel dispensers and the triangular shape that the old Nice and Easy was using as their motif, now Circle K. As well, in the this is kind of looking to the northeast, and in that section in that northeast, again, we have that future 3,500 square foot single story. We have the landscaping just like it was shown on the model, and I'm going to go back so you can see it's not over intense. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is the landscaping that we're showing on that street view. But when we bring that down to a street view, now that that grocery store building starts to get blended in, and it's a real live depiction in this model. That building is sitting, as Devin said, some 400 feet back from the road, so it's not as as intense as the buildings that are close to the road. So again, as we approach now, and we're taking these slices, and we approach that new proposed signal, and we've already shown a proposed turn lane, that access, the signalized entry, and again, some very modest landscaping in how that building being pushed 400 feet back. And again, this can be used as a tool to help enhance some things and help further screen what we're looking at. And again, this building, the 3,500 square foot that is closer to the road, even though it's a single story, starts to show some massing and as well kind of screen back and kind of give that character that we're talking about here and that we're trying to create here for the village. So now we're like already sitting at the intersection, taking a left, heading toward that driveway into the proposed development. Again, pretty well screened and hidden. And again, we haven't worked with the proposed tenant and get the color schemes and such. We use some earth tones because, frankly, the model that we use for that building is a prototypical model, but we haven't got into color selections or fine-tuned architecturals with regards to the tenant use at this point in time. As the 3,500 square foot building, there's no architecture for it. We just kind of took a very simple model. Devin and I talked today about, well, what's this, the finished materials of this? Is it going to be a hardy plank? Is it going to be some type of board and plank or shingled or some type of enhancement of a stone knee wall around it? It can be a lot of different things, but again, for the model purpose, it kind of shows you as you look at this, the massing of that 3,500 square feet and how much it screens back. the proposed building. And again, the modest landscaping behind there really starts to screen that building. So now as we push further to the east, and again, the model of the two-story accountant's building, his small side parking area, and kind of looking back at the berm and the screening that you have here, it kind of gets into keeping, as Devin said, those the aspect of the frontage pieces of the small buildings up front, and you know, kind of still working on what we have. So again, becomes a model. That model of this development, and as we bring that model into a street view, what this development will look like for the people driving and walking and up and down East Genesee Street. So Devin, you can further grab a hold of comments from that point.
Yeah, let me just kind of hit specifically on the comprehensive plan. The stated goals and strategies include a sustainable mix of recreational, residential, and commercial uses. Strategies outlined in support of that goal include encouraging vibrant mixed-use development in commercial areas and supporting business uses to ensure a stable tax base and provide quality employment opportunities for residents. Plan also encourages development of accessible and conveniently located affordable housing in proximity to daily services, institutional uses such as libraries, banks, and grocery, public transit, and neighborhoods, along with continuing to support the events and activities of the Fayetteville Senior Center. This is right out of the comprehensive plan. I plagiarized the heck out of that, frankly. The key issues and strategies, one of the things is concept plan and strategies in the focal point of 547 East Genesee Street. The concept plan is based on creating a campus-type development with a mix of uses served by a proposed road beginning at a new signalized intersection at East Genesee Street, continuing north and terminating at a trailhead parking area for residents and visitors to use while exploring future walking trails, which open up to over 15 acres of residentially zoned land to passive recreational use, which is sensitive to the Bishop's Brook open space corridor, as suggested in the comprehensive plan specifically. And then the following strategies of the initiatives and strategies of the plan are stated, and I'll address how we address them. Allow flexibility in use, but not in character. The proposed development will include mixed uses with a full-service grocery store, a senior facility, a commercial building at East Genesee Street, and over 15 acres of open space to the north, which is sensitive to Bishop Brook open space corridor. 2, ensure access management through shared driveways and parking lots. Coordinate entranceway with potential redevelopment on south side of East Genesee Street. Again, these strategies are literally verbatim out of the adopted comprehensive plan. The development process proposes a signalized shared access drive off road off East Genesee Street with the adjacent Circle K convenience store, and is located through coordination with New York State DOT to align with potential redevelopment on the south side of East Genesee Street and potential future traffic improvements. This signalized intersection provides safe pedestrian movement across Genesee Street, which is a critical recognized goal in the commercial design guidelines, with the Fayetteville Senior Center within walking distance on the south side of Genesee Street, yet no safe way to cross the street. The new signal enables seniors a safe way to access not only the proposed grocery store, but also the post office and Methodist Church, among other businesses located on the north side of the road. Require landscape islands within the parking lots whenever possible. The proposed development will include perimeter landscaping treatments, end row islands, and interior pedestrian sidewalk with landscaping. 4, create a natural buffer between the new development and Bishop Brook to allow recreational connections and protect water quality. The master plan development includes a future recreational walking trail with trailhead parking for the approximate 15 acres of residentially zoned land. This area will provide the village with potential for passive recreation area in the future and access to Bishop's Brook while providing buffering to the residential areas and protecting the surface water quality of the brook. It may enable future connection to Green Lakes State Park. Encourage development patterns compatible in scale and form with adjacent residential areas. While this is a strategy suggested in the comprehensive plan under focal planning area, specifically 547 East Genesee Street, is located in the upper business district, which is comprised of commercial uses, and it offers a variety of services and goods, with many of the retail businesses catering to village residents. This is actually out of the Appendix 2 of the comprehensive plan. But a significant number of uses are located to take advantage of through traffic volumes on Genesee Street. According to Appendix 2, there's a concentration of community services, which includes such institutions such as libraries, churches, schools, government buildings, emergency services, and cemeteries in that upper business district that we are located. The design guidelines, which is not an adapted land use plan, but it is a guideline that the village has adopted, characterizes the upper business district as different from all the others in that it's less dense, the buildings are set further apart, and features some significantly larger parcels. The zoning classifications are contemporary business and industrial. Currently, the uses are compatible. However, the site amenities, including dispositions and architectural styles, are discordant. The one element that unites the character area is the streetscape. The village streetscape does continue into this character area, establishing a strong unifying thread of village character. The guidelines continue stating more intense commercial uses are appropriate along this corridor. While the guidelines are not the comprehensive plan, they do identify characteristics of the existing neighborhood, of which they're the proposed campus style development with the smaller 3,500 square foot commercial building on the front provides a visual break from Genesee Street to the grocery store and the seniors facility behind the fronting buildings, consistent with the character of the upper business district neighborhood. And then the last one that they had was the buffer visual impacts of trees and other vegetation between East Genesee Street and the new development, which we've already covered. So I think that that kind of covers all of the elements with respect to the comprehensive plan, how we are consistent with it. There's a number of community benefits of this project. One of them is preservation of the 15 acres to the rear. We're filling in the missing tooth or the large gap in the streetscape. We're providing traffic improvements, including the signal, to provide that safe pedestrian crossing to and from the senior center. We're redeveloping a 70-year-old industrial building. We're cleaning up a brownfield site, putting the land back to productive use, increasing the tax base, and providing needed services and employment opportunities, all of which are part of the goals of the comprehensive plan. This project is consistent not only with the adopted land use plan for all the reasons I've already said, but it also is directly compatible with secret findings on this exact subject property by the Village Board of Trustees in a unanimous resolution on August 19th of 2019, which they identified as an acceptable alternative consistent with social, economic, and other essential conditions that would avoid or minimize adverse environmental impacts to the maximum extent compatible. One of those would be to incorporate a large retail facility, such as a grocery store, approximately 60,000 square feet. They talk about a housing component of 40,000 feet, and then a 3,500 square foot commercial building. Our project is essentially designed to this acceptable alternative. And the Board of Trustees confirmed through the stated alternative that the property could be developed in a manner that provides mitigation of the environmental impacts associated with the property. And they further noted that should the applicant decide to propose a development in a manner consistent with the mixed use of, they pointed out senior housing complex and retail commercial use discussed herein, the Board of Trustees believes that such a project may minimize the adverse environmental impacts to the maximum extent practicable. Village Board of Trustees is the lawmaking body of the village and is the overseeing board of the village land use boards. They adopt the comprehensive plan, the village codes, and the zoning ordinance. And their resolution pertaining to our specific property is the subject of the final environmental or FEAF outlining an acceptable project for this specific property. So that's why we believe we're not only consistent with the community plans and community character, but also with, I guess, the Village Board of Trustees agrees also, at least on record in their findings. So that's all I have to present this evening. I don't know, Matt and Paul, if you have further items you'd like to share.
I'm going to step in here, please, and I'm going to ask if there are additional items to be shared, that they actually be new items and not a reading of the materials that have been sent to us already. Just so that we all read the materials. We don't need to have it read to us again. So Matt, do you have anything new?
No, that's our presentation for the
Okay.
most part, Jane.
Thank you.
We're here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would like to make a comment first. Paul, actually, before I do that, Paul, do you have anything new to add?
No, other than the modification of the plans to conform with the ZBA application and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think that was well laid out by my client, and the materials that were submitted, I think he just simply wanted to put that back on the record to refresh recollection, and for the benefit of those people who may be attending this presentation by way of Zoom.
Thank you. Okay, so it's been 8 months since we've seen this application. Because of that, I would like to remind everyone, specifically on the planning board and those who are in attendance, why the planning board is reviewing seeker at this point when there hasn't been a decision made on any of the applications that have been submitted by the applicant. So there are 3 applications submitted by the applicant. One is a request for a variance. The second one is a special use permit request. And the third one is a request for site plan approval. When this matter came before the boards, planning board and ZBA, it was decided at that time by the boards that there would be a coordinated seeker review approach to this particular applicant and application. It is by village zoning requirement or code requirement that when the ZBA receives an application for a variance, the ZBA submits that application to the planning board. We make a recommendation to the ZBA, and then they consider the application and they make the final decision on that particular application. Because the recommendation was coming to us first, and because we ultimately have responsibility for special use permit and for site plan approval, it was decided by both boards that the planning board would be the lead agency in this seeker process. So that is why the seeker decision is with the planning board, and we need to make a seeker decision or seeker determination before we can move to the decisions by the ZBA, and then depending on what they decide, maybe back to the planning board. So that just gives everybody a refresher of why we are at this kind of status we're at right now. So we did hear from the applicant tonight. I know we have some attendees here. I know we have some questions that have come through the Q&A panel. If there is an attendee who would like to make a comment, not questions, I will try to answer the questions, or I'll put the questions to the applicant as I can, but I don't want questions right now from the attendees. But if you have a comment that you would like to share, we'll give you 3 minutes to make a comment. Everybody gets 3 minutes. If you're interested, I'm assuming we have a raise your hand option, Karen, and they can raise their hand.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll wait a few minutes. I can look at some of these questions that were put through the panel here. Let's start at the top. There's a question I think about the, I'm going to call them the back 10 acres. I don't know if I have that right, Matt, but is the back end of the property that I think Devin was talking about, where there may be some trails back there, and that's where they were culling the deer. Is that property suited for that kind of passive recreational use? I understand that there's been that this is a brownfield site. And so the question really is that a suitable use for the back end of that property? If that makes sense. Matt.
You want me to handle that, Devin?
Yeah, sure.
So on the far north end of that section of the property, you have Bishop's Brook, which is a pretty scenic area. The topographic from our site kind of rolls down. Our site is higher than Bishop's Brook itself. Far as passive recreation, I would say yes, it's suited for walking trails, aesthetic trails. The restrictions by DEC are more towards the south, right at that town line to the industrial, not town line, but the residential district to the industrial district zone. That is where their Rambold OBG have been doing the groundwater extractions for 20 years. And at that location, you would be considered a area of which is a concern if you were digging into the ground or putting in foundations or doing any type of soil excavations. But doing smart passive recreation, I mean, you've got a lot of areas in different urbanized areas where there's passive recreations over old landfills and over, and reutilizing some of those areas in a smart passive recreation manner. And certainly what is the contamination on this site, being in the groundwater table, 10 to 12 feet below the surface, certainly is suitable.
Okay.
I guess I'll leave it at that.
That's good. Thank you.
All right, there is one individual that's raised their hand.
Yes. Rebecca Rolnick, would you like to make your comment if you have 3 minutes?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Rolnick. I've been a resident of the Brookside neighborhood for 15 years. I graduated from FM and from the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And I just like to comment that I'm concerned about the potential impacts on, right next to this is Green Lake State Park. It's a designated bird conservation area. And from the Honda dealership, it's already causing a lot of lights that are viewed from Green Lake State Park. And I did notice in the plan that it said that it would be all dark sky friendly lights, which I appreciated that, but I'm still concerned about the impact of the lights and on the development because the woods currently from the spot that would be developed are continuous with the state park, which means that a lot of the animals and birds that live in the state park also live in those woods. And so I'm concerned about the effects on the bird conservation area and on the brook.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, there's another question here. I'm going to direct everybody in attendance. There's some questions about traffic. There is a traffic study that was already prepared, or traffic assessment that was prepared for this project. I do believe the road is being widened with a turn lane. So the answer is yes. I don't know how many cars per day are coming and going. There's an estimate. It's set forth in the traffic assessment. I don't know, Matt, you can tell me if you know off the top of your head.
Not off the top of my head. I didn't get back into that whole traffic. Right. And certainly the board heard from our traffic engineer, Gordon Stansberry, back last summer.
Right. No, I agree with you on that one. So I direct people's attention to that traffic assessment if you really want to get into the details. We don't have that kind of granular detail with us right tonight.
Are you ready for the next comment, or did you want to go through the questions?
Let me go through the questions real quick. Just hang in there for the person who raised their hand. my understanding based on what it was said, presented to us tonight, is there is not a definitive use identified for the 3,800 square foot building at this point. Is that correct? Am I
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
How many years, I mean, do you have, I don't think at this point you have an understanding of the size of the trees that will, the size they will be when they are planted. Therefore, how many years it will take for them to get to that kind of height that you represented in your modeling. So,
And as you and Joanne know, it becomes a balance of what we can plant and make it sustainable so it does last. We would certainly, work with the planning board at that time to provide appropriately sized screening vegetation. So certainly in the model and the graphic, we're somewhere, and we can tighten up that graphic. Frankly, it was kind of a last week effort to kind of show you guys something.
okay, so the question is, will current water and sewer infrastructure support the project? The answer is yes. Question is, I don't see much of a shoulder for biking. How much of a bike lane will there be? I don't think you're proposing any bike lane on Genesee Street. Am I correct on that?
Again, any work in Genesee is going to be under DOT review and control when we talk about that center turn lane and the geometric configuration. Typically, they're not going to have a bike lane that goes nowhere, so that bike lane would have to run through the entire village. So we are extending sidewalks and making it pedestrian friendly. And we will do whatever DOT says associated with that road widening that makes sense.
Thank you. There are a lot of other questions here that really get into the nitty gritty of the project. And I am not trying to ignore these questions. I am actually not ignoring these questions, but some of that granular detail actually is not known at this time because, as I said, they haven't even gotten to site plan review yet. We're still at the seeker review stage of this project. So, so when we get into more of, if we get to that far, we will get into these granular details and we will answer every single one of these questions. But for tonight, we are going to focus more on the more focused seeker related issues and questions, because that's our responsibility ahead of us right now. When I say our, I mean the planning board's responsibility right now. So Casey, you had your hand up. Thank you for your patience. You have 3 minutes to make a comment.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. I did not prepare to comment, but I wanted to start by saying that I really appreciate all the work that the developer has done in creating such a beautiful presentation tonight. And I recognize that they have put in a lot of money and put in a lot of effort to try to come up with a plan that works for our community. So I do really appreciate that. But I have some concerns. One of the things that I would like to address is the part where they talk about the comprehensive plan. And I'm not going to review the comprehensive plan in detail like they did, especially since members of the planning board developed the comprehensive plan and participated both in 2008 and 2014. I just want to say one thing. The mission statement is the most important part of that document, and I will read that. The Fayetteville community is committed to sustaining our quality of life. We do this by preserving our historic character as a small village, protecting our natural resources, encouraging pedestrian connections, and promoting local and regional heritage. We support economic development that enhances our quality of life. And our plan is overdue for an update, but hopefully we'll be getting to that. When we talk about the historic resources, I question some of the answers in part 1. I don't understand the methodology for the properties identified. If I look at the historic resources survey that was done for our village and is by the Historic Preservation Committee, I see that there are a number of properties that are not listed in part 1 that would fit the same kind of criteria that they have listed. I also am very concerned that this whole area is considered potential historic district, and that is lost in a lot of the documents that have been presented. I am very concerned that Ramble O'Brien and Gear were given approval of their draft investigation work plan by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation at the beginning of 2020. As they've been studying and monitoring this site for many years, it would seem they would have been able to produce their report to the New York State DEC by now. They have not as of 1/26/21. And I believe with the seriousness of this brownfield cleanup program, and as you are considering an environmental assessment, that document should be a critical part of your consideration. You have oftentimes mentioned, Chair Rice, that you have not had enough information on the environment, and I think that would be critical. Our own assessment of the bird conservation area of Green Lakes shows that it is much closer to the site than has been printed in the document. They say 1 mile. We say it's below 500 feet. And that bird conservation area is a part of the New York State system. And it is the largest grasslands bird conservation area in that system. When you stand on the vista of the hill above Aladdin and you look out over that vista, you understand why it is in the plan that vista be protected and enhanced by Green Lakes development. That part gets lost. That whole forest is continuous. We do not know who is going to own and take care of the land in the back. And it just seems like a promise that we do not really know too much about, and we need to. Obviously, you know, I'm quite interested in this project, but I'll stop because I'm probably at 3 minutes.
Yeah, you are. You just went over. So thank you, Casey. I appreciate your time, your attention to time. Okay, we don't see any other hands up. I think at this point, I'd like to close the floor to public comments, and I'd like to turn the attention into the plan. Oh, I've got a Mike Smith. He just threw his hand up. Mike,
Okay.
3 minutes. Mike, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yes, thank you for the presentation tonight. I do have one question that came to mind after reading the long form EAF submission. The submission says at one point that one of the benefits of the site is that this project will result in the cleanup of a brownfield site. But elsewhere in that very same paper, about a page down, it says that there will be no excavation, which I take to mean that there'll be no removal of the soil. So I'm trying to state this kind of in the opposite of a Jeopardy question, as not a question, but a statement, just to say that I find the section C inconsistent with section D. I don't understand that you can clean up a brownfield site if you don't remove any of the contaminated soil. And if there is contaminated soil being removed, then the answer to the question, to the section D2 little a, should be yes, there will be excavation taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, we have one other hand up. It's phone number 315 ending in digits 804. You need to unmute yourself, please. I don't know how to do that. So Karen, I don't know if you can help them out. It's a phone.
Yeah, I've asked to unmute. I don't have a way of opening it. But it definitely is given the permission to talk.
Okay, well, they took their hand down. I'm not sure how that works. So
I took the hand down, but because it's a phone call, I don't think it.
Well,
you have permission to talk. I see that you tried to raise your hand again. You have permission to talk. Please go ahead. I'm not sure what's going
That's
on
fine.
with their telephone.
Yep. All right. So we're going to close the floor to comments right now and going to move to the planning board members. So planning board members, last time we were together on this project, it was in June of 2020. And we very methodically went through part 2 of the seeker form, which we can do again today. I have it up on my screen here. It can walk us through. But before we do that, I want it open in case somebody has a question specifically for the applicant that they would like answered. That maybe it didn't get answered in his presentation. Anybody have a question for the applicant? Sarah, go ahead.
So one of the things utilized in the discussion about why this is consistent is this generic senior living, which in some parts of your presentation is a memory care facility, and in other parts has seniors going to the post office and the senior center and lots of other things that people who live in memory care facilities don't do. So I'm curious, do you actually have a tenant for that building, and what is in fact the utilization of that project?
I'll answer that, Sarah. The reason it's generic is because it isn't finalized, and that we wanted to make sure that it was included. We had a plan of something of substance that we could put there and go through this process around, so we could give a master plan for our project rather than leave out a phase. It is a potential. It's not, we don't have an actual yet. I have 3 letters of intent of folks that want to develop on that site for seniors. That's why it's listed as a seniors facility. It's not listed as memory care previously, prior to COVID. Early in the process, we did actually have a memory care facility of 42,000 square feet. That was a national group that was, we designed that plan around. So we just stuck with it, but then we kind of rolled it back from a generic standpoint. So we're planning the impacts from, the impact standpoint, but as far as the actual final use, that'll have to be a site plan issue because we don't have that answer yet. So thank you for the question.
Okay. Then I also want to know whether any of you have questions for the process that we, it's not a straightforward process. So hopefully everybody just reminded themselves and went back to our June meeting minutes. We had a video, and you just were able to kind of brush off the dust and get back into the process. But I want to make sure if anybody has a question, let's ask it now. If not, we're going to, my thinking here is that we walk through part 2 of seeker. And when we're done, if we're ready, based on our discussion amongst us, we can render a decision and just move forward from there. So if you're all on board with that, we're going to start with the first. Now we're going through part 2. I've reviewed part 1. I'm assuming everybody has reviewed part 1. So with part 2, the first question is impact on land. Proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. Is there going to be a proposed, is there going to be an impact on land? When we looked at this before, we did have the answer yes to this question. And planning board members, is it of value to you for me to, I guess, A, share my screen, and B, read all of the individual subtext to this question? Or do you have that?
I think that's not necessary. To be quite honest, I think this has been examined quite a lot, actually, and the proposal is not new. So I have in front of me actually what we reviewed at our May 2020 meeting when we determined that 9 of the criteria pose environmental impacts, and those were to land, plants and animals, historic resources and archaeological resources, transportation, energy, noise, odor and light, impacts upon human health, consistency with comprehensive plan, and consistency with community character. The proposal hasn't changed. The planning board hasn't changed. So to be quite honest, I don't know that we need to rehash everything. I mean, I would think maybe we look again at the ones where we didn't indicate there were impacts and see if our mind has changed on that. But that's how I suggest approaching it. We've really studied this to death, and that's where I come from.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I do think it'd be not only good for us, but good for our attendees to just hit upon every question. We don't have to go through each subtext because we have all done that unless you want to. I need to, just get direction from you guys. Impact on land. Yes, there's an impact on land. Second question, is there an impact on geological features? The proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site. We responded in the past that no, there is no impact on geological features. Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
Number 3, impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies. We said no. It's not going to be an impact on wetlands. There are no wetlands on the site. So no major impact there. Impact on groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. Our review of that was no answer. We're not going to have major impacts on that. Impact on flooding. The proposed action may result in development on land subject to flooding. We don't have, it's not a designated floodway. This all references to 100-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain. So there, the answer was no to that question. No major impact. Impacts on air. The proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. We said no, there's no impact on a state regulated air emission source. Number 7, impacts on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna. And our answer was yes, primarily that the proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwintering habitat for the predominant species that occupy or use the project site. And we said, yes, that could be an impact. All in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay. Impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources. We said no, primarily because there are no agricultural resources on the site. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. And we answered yes, that there could be a major moderate to large impact on aesthetic resources. Impact on historic and archaeological resources. The proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historic or archaeological resource, and we answered yes. There could be a moderate to large impact on archaeological resources. Impact on open space and recreation. The proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunities or a reduction of an open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan. And we answered no. There would not be moderate to large impact on any open space or recreation resource. Impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action may be located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area. We said no, it is not. So no major impact. Impact on transportation. The proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems. Yes, moderate to large transportation system. 14, impact on energy. The proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. Now, I have that we recorded that as a no to moderate to large impact, but Jennifer, you seem to have a different take on that. So
I had yes as energy. That's what I had. And I had no in my records for aesthetic. So I may have flipped it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think on the energy one, it's just the actual calculation. There is over 100 square feet of building on the site. So it meets one of the sub criteria.
Okay.
That's
So
how
then
that's how I had it marked, Jane. This is
Okay.
Karen. That 14D was moderate to large, so ultimately it was considered a yes.
Okay.
But going back to that point, Jennifer, number 9, originally I had no as far as aesthetics.
Okay. All right. So let's just revisit that with the full board. Number 9, impact on aesthetic resources. How does the board feel about that?
Well,
Is
I'm
that-
actually glad this came up because I think that actually that should be a yes. And I'm not sure why in May 2020 we said no, but I think it actually is a yes.
So I have here proposed action may be visible from any officially designated federal, state, or local scenic or aesthetic resource.
And I think
We
that's
have-
the Green Lakes issue because from Green Lakes is above.
Yes, but this is a officially designated resource, and we said no to that. There's no official designated scenic or aesthetic resource. Green Lakes is definitely a resource, don't get me wrong, but it's not officially designated federal, state, or local, right?
That's correct.
The proposed action may result in the obstruction, elimination, or significant screening of one or more officially designated scenic views. The answer is no to that because, again, focus on the words officially
Right.
designated. Number C, the proposed action may be visible from publicly accessible vantage points seasonally or year-round.
That was,
This,
yeah.
excuse me, Joanne?
That
Yeah.
was a yes, I recall.
I have them both marked yes. It is definitely visible from publicly accessible vantage points. And then from that perspective, the comment made earlier and experienced by many from Green Lakes. The situation or activity in which viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action is routine travel by residents, including travel to and from work, is a yes. Recreational or tourism-based activities. I said no, but now that the mention of Green Lakes, I'm going to change that to a yes.
Mhm.
The proposed action may cause a diminishment of the public enjoyment and appreciation of designated aesthetic resource. I don't know.
We don't have a designated resource.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sarah. There are similar projects visible within the following distance of the proposed project. And then it gives a distance of 0 to ½ mile to 3 mile, 3 to 5 mile, or 5+ mile. I don't think there's similar projects, so I would say no. And then other impacts, if you have any you would like to mention. So with that, we have 2 subsections C and D are marked yes, moderate to large impact. A, B, and E are marked no, and F are marked no. So let me read the main point again. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource.
Well, the only other project use between Green Lakes and this parcel is a piece of Brookside. But that's if it's not a designated aesthetic site, I don't know if that matters.
Well, the primary question, Sarah, does not use the word officially designated.
Mhm.
Current land use patterns between proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource.
So I think Green Lakes is a scenic resource.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I answered 9 yes. That's my answer. I don't know if others disagree with me. If so,
I do. I agree with you. And I think this is a yes.
Dan, do you have comment? You're on mute.
Yep. I agree with what you're saying. It is a yes.
Okay. Okay, then 9 is a yes, and 10, 11, 12, we've gone through 13. Impact on transportation is a yes. Impact on energy is a yes. Impact on noise, odor, and light. The proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odor, or outdoor lighting. We said yes. Impact on human health. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. I show here that we answered no to that, and I think it's because these questions down here are really very specific. Do you guys want me to run through the subsections here? Okay. Subsection A, the proposed action is located within 1,500 feet of a school, hospital, licensed daycare center, group home, nursing home, or retirement community. The answer is no.
It is.
Stana.
The
Creative
Daycare
environment.
center right
Oh,
there.
the daycare center. Yeah.
I had this as yes.
I had it as yes too, Jane.
All right. Then I think I just misrecorded this. Look at that. It is misrecorded. Okay, so the site of the proposed action is currently undergoing remediation. Yes, there is a completed emergency spill remediation or a completed environmental site remediation on or adjacent to the site of the proposed action. Yes. The site of the action is subject to an institutional control limiting the use of the property. The answer is yes. The proposed action may affect institutional control measures that were put in place to ensure that the site remains protective of the human health. We don't really know the answer to that question, and the proposed action has adequate control measures in place to ensure that future generation treatment or disposal of hazardous waste will be protective of the environment and health. We want to say that would be true, but we don't really have the answers. I think this is what tripped us into inviting Miss White who came and spoke?
From Rambo. Miss
From
Wright.
Rambo.
I think it was Wright.
Right.
RW,
Yeah. And she did a great job. So there are measures in place. We're expecting that those measures will be in place for this proposal and that they won't be negatively affected. The proposed action involves construction or modification of a solid waste management facility. No, the proposed action may result in the unearthing of solid or hazardous waste. Well, we would hope not. So no, the proposed action may result in an increase in the rate of disposal or processing of solid waste. The answer is yes there, right? Because grocery store is going to generate solid waste. Yeah.
There's
More
multiple
than,
dumpsters on site.
yeah. Proposed action may result in excavation or other disturbance within 2,000 feet of a site used for disposal. The answer is no. The proposed action may result in the migration of explosive gases from a landfill site to adjacent off-site structures. The answer is no. The proposed action may result in the release of contaminated leachate from the project site.
Well, I think that's what their mitigation plan is hoping to prevent.
That's right. So hope not.
But I think that has, I mean, human health has to
Yeah.
be yes on this, but it's addressed with the decontamination plan.
Yeah. So impact on human health is yes. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. Is that a moderate to large impact, or is that a small?
May I?
Yeah.
I think the fact that the point of this is the brownfield mitigation, it's like there's an impact, but it should be a positive impact.
So you're saying it's no or small negative impact?
Well, assuming they do it right.
It says new or existing.
Yes, it does.
So I think the answer has to be yes, but if this is, you know, the point of this plan is to implement the brownfield mitigation, and I don't know, Joanne, if you can help with this, but you know, my feeling is the idea is it makes it better.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, yeah.
I think environmentally that's true, but if you live on Cashin or you live on Camet, you might answer this differently.
Right.
Well, but I mean, it gets back to the question of why those residents wouldn't want the site cleaned up. I mean, yes, there may be exposure, but there may be exposure if nothing's done and the site continues to deteriorate. Why not look for the developer to clean up the site?
So I'm thinking that if I read this question straight up, the proposed action may have an impact on human health. The answer is yes. And we went down here through each one of these individual subparts. And it's split without getting into specifics. I mean, it's pretty split in terms of no or small impact to moderate to large impact. If I answer this question, yes, I will simply be seeking the kinds of documentation and assurances, the documentation to give me the assurances that we will have no to small impact. And that's all we're looking for from a seeker perspective. This question is not to stop a project. It's just to ensure that what I just said, that you have no to small impact. My thinking is, my opinion is this is a yes, and that we just make sure it's addressed. Like we said, yeah, it should be addressed. And if it's addressed properly and appropriately, then Dan's right. We get a cleaned up site and it's done well and everybody's protected.
And the impact is positive. Yeah.
And the impact becomes a positive. Yes. Number 17, consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with the adopted land use plans. We have a yes, it is not consistent with land use plans. Now you heard this evening the applicant's position and presentation as to why, in their opinion, it is consistent with adopted land use plans. And so if board members if you want me to run through these individual parts again, I will. If you're comfortable with how we all answered this before and what you heard tonight is not changing your answer, then let me know that as well. So what's your pleasure?
I'm comfortable with how we answered it before.
Does anybody want me to run through these?
No.
Everybody.
No.
Hey, Jane.
Just a minute. Go ahead, Joanne. I didn't hear what you said.
I don't feel that I need to. I think, we answered it.
Okay.
Hey, Jane.
Ted
Somebody
was saying
said,
something.
somebody said, hey, Jane.
It's Ted. Can you hear me?
Oh, Ted. Yes. Hi.
Yep. I just want to chip in to make sure that for the record, you have a completed part 2 that will become part of the file when the dust settles, because some of the things we're talking about now were items that were previously addressed in June.
Yes, that's why thank you. Yes. And that's why we're walking through part 2 right now, so that we are confirming and changing if we need to change it, so that we have a February record, not a June record, or we'll have both.
Right. And I just want it to be complete with respect to wherever, especially we've said there's going to be a yes, that we should make sure that either back in June or this evening, we've done the subset of questions underneath the big question.
Okay. So with that in mind, just for this particular, I think these last 2 questions, I am going to run through the subpoints. The proposed actions land use components may be different from or in sharp contrast to current surrounding land use patterns. We said yes, that's a moderate to large impact. The proposed action will cause the permanent population of the city, town, or village in which the project is located to grow by more than 5%. We said no, that's a small, that's not an impact, that's not a concern. The proposed action is inconsistent with local land use plans or zoning regulations. We said yes, that is a moderate to large impact. The proposed action is inconsistent with any county plans or other regional land use plans. And we answered that no or small impact. Let's see, the proposed action may cause a change in the density of development that is not supported by existing infrastructure or is distant from existing infrastructure. And we said no, that's no or small impact. There's existing infrastructure is adequate. The proposed action is located in an area characterized by low density development that will require new or expanded public infrastructure. And we said, yes, that's a moderate to large impact, specific focus on Genesee Street and, transportation infrastructure, as well as some other infrastructure. The proposed action may induce secondary development impacts. Example given, residential or commercial development not included in the proposed action. And we marked that as a no or small impact. We don't see, there's not an obvious secondary, an inducement of secondary development from this proposal.
So Jane, I don't know that it's material, but I think F would be smaller. I mean, there's already water, sewer, roads, everything there. I don't think that widening a road constitutes a major in public infrastructure.
Moderate, you don't think that's a moderate to large impact? Okay.
I think we're going to end up doing that anyway.
Okay, any comments from others?
I think a traffic light is.
Yeah, I agree. We almost never put in new traffic lights. I mean, the village, that is.
So I tend to agree that it is, it's at least a moderate, if not a large impact. That's a significant intersection there in our village. And that is a primary route for people to come and go. So it's going to affect a lot of people. But let me ask you this question, Sarah. Even if you put a no to small impact on F, how does that result in your response to number 17?
I think
overall?
The big question is still yes. So that's
okay.
Not really material. I just think that.
Well, it's material
already.
Yeah. Our recording now captures this discussion, which is why I wanted to do this. This is important. It's all material. So thank you for bringing that up. So question number 18, consistency with community character. The proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. The answer to that is yes. And the sections there read, the proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. We answered no or small impact may occur. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, example given schools, police, and fire. We answered no or small impact would occur. The proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there is a shortage of such housing. We answered no or small impact. The proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. And we said no or small impact. The proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. We said moderate to large impact. Yes, there is an impact, moderate to large. And the proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape. And I think we answered that no or small impact, but I think we had a pretty good discussion over this section too, because we discussed what is the existing natural landscape.
I had a note that we, under other impacts, had notes about it being inconsistent with commercial design guidelines.
Oh, right, right.
I think the presentation tonight did address the streetscape more than in the previous years, and with the point of being consistent with the comprehensive plan, but it doesn't address the grocery store.
I also want to go back to, and by the way, it was a great presentation, a great refresher. The buildings they called out around the village, why didn't they call out the senior center, which was mentioned several times, as a 150-year-old building? It's been open for 40 years. Creative Environment Day School, it's a business that's been open for 50 years. Why weren't those shown as part of the character of the community?
Yeah, you make a good point. I don't know where the senior center is relative to, it's down the street a ways. I guess I just don't know the distance.
It's obviously within walking distance. It was mentioned a few times in the presentation.
Yeah. Okay,
There's
so
also,
then.
oh, sorry, I just was going to say, to Scott's point, there's also the dentist's office. There's an assemblage of wood frame buildings as you head from west to east before you get to the Quickie Mart or whatever it's called. And those are all lined up. They're very much part of the character of that part of the streetscape.
Okay, so that takes us through part 2. And so we have, of the 18 questions, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
It was 9. We added aesthetics.
I think we're up to 10. Is that right, Jennifer?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
10.
So we have 10 marked yes out of 18. So now that we've done that, do we have any discussion or comments from planning board members that they'd like to share?
Well, I'm happy to share. I re-listened to the entire recording over the past 2 days of the June meeting. And I saw that I spoke for 5 minutes in June. I'm not going to speak for 5 minutes tonight. However, as I said earlier, the project is the same. The planning board is the same. And I can't support a negative declaration of this project, the long EAF done for this project. My comments from June 1st all stay the same. And basically, to summarize what I said in June, this project we've just identified is now flagging 10 of 18, it was 9 last June, of potential environmental impacts warranting further study. The site plan layout doesn't meet the comp plan or the commercial design guidelines, and it's inconsistent with the community character. The building sizes are way beyond what the zoning allows, 4 and 5 times what the zoning allows. And the zoning hasn't changed in years, so that's the same. It hasn't changed since we last reviewed this. This is a critically important site to the village. It's one of probably 2 major redevelopment sites. And it's absolutely critical that in comparing this project against what are the adopted city village regulations and design guidelines, et cetera, that it be consistent. The site layout poses significant environmental issues, which is how we're getting, part of how we're getting to these 10 potential impact areas. We've not to date, and we've been asking for this and commenting on this since the fall of 2019, we have not seen an alternative site plan of how it could begin to actually address the comp plan the commercial design guidelines, community character. Haven't seen it. The fact that the zoning variance is requested, which we've been asked to make a recommendation upon, are 4 and 5 times what's allowed, suggests that this probably is not the right zoning district. I don't understand, as I didn't last June, why it is that this zoning district's being proposed. It would be really interesting to see how it would fare if compared or proposed in an actual commercial zoning district. For instance, the contemporary business zoning district has specific design guidelines that has things about limited front yard parking, etc. So it's always a sign if a variance request is so huge that the zoning district just isn't right. So that's extremely problematic. So that's where I'm at. I'm where I was last June because the project hasn't changed, and we still haven't seen an alternative site plan that's addressed the same comments that were made by the board last June. Yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I think I will leave it at that. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else?
I would agree. We talked a lot about the layout and how, as you could look at the front line, having a building in the middle or a hole in the street line to repair it, but when everything else behind it just ignores that and buildings turn to the side, the front doors not to the street. The layout and pattern of the road system inside of there is nothing like a village character. The look of, I know this is just a quick, SketchUp model, but to have a traffic light, at your entrance to a village street, if you will, it just doesn't have the character, but it could. And I think there would be some, possibilities to work on a site plan, as Jennifer says, and that we were hopeful that that was the direction we're going to see. But it's hard to change your opinion when it's the exact same plan.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm not going to repeat myself either. I'm on record from June, and both written record and verbal record, I stand by I've given it a lot of very serious consideration. I agree there has not been any changes to this layout, so the consideration ends up being the same for myself. So at this point, I'd like for the planning board, if we don't have any other comments, I would entertain a motion with respect to our seeker decision.
I think I already proposed the motion. So I'm happy to go on record as proposing the motion that we positive deck the long EAF that was done.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat your motion, Jennifer, that you're proposing that we issue a positive declaration based on our answer to part 2, our review of part 2 of the long form, and our response to all of the subsections within the long form. Am I correct on that? I just repeated your motion. That's correct?
Correct. That our board previously and then tonight actually adding another identified 10 of 18 criteria as having environmental impacts that warrant additional study.
I'd like to add to that motion, if that's okay. I'd like to add to the fact that we are reviewing this application under the current zoning district of industrial zone, and that I find that to be a very distinguishing fact and very critical fact for our review. As a planning board, we're required to follow our zoning districts, our zoning code. And so that is our guidepost. I'm very aware of the statement of findings that was issued by the Board of Trustees relative to this particular site, and specifically to their findings that a mixed-use complex that includes a grocery store of 60,000 square feet and a senior center of 40,000 square feet would reduce the environmental impacts compared to what was being proposed at that time, which was a 200 plus apartment complex with commercial use. So those findings, although very relevant and very important, are distinguishable from what we are actually facing, are asked to assess tonight. Most specifically for me, it's our requirement as a planning board to follow our local zoning code, which has been in place since 2019. It's the industrial zoning code, and it requires, it doesn't require, it actually has a maximum on a building size. And the fact that that's still in place today tells me that is what we're to follow. So getting back to seeker, I think we've done a very thorough and taken a very hard look at what's being proposed tonight. And we've taken a very thorough review of part 2 and our responsibilities under part 2. So with that, I support Jennifer's motion. So actually, I guess I'll make a second. I'll be the second to Jennifer's motion. And why don't we do a roll call? Sarah?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Jane? Yes, I vote yes. And Jennifer, it was your motion, so.
Yes, I'm not going to go against my own motion.
Yeah, didn't think so. Strange things have happened. So I think the board has a resolution tonight with, whereas, I'm going to read the whole thing for the record. Whereas pursuant to Article 8 of New York State Environmental Conservation Law as amended and the regulations of New York State Department of Environmental Conservation promulgate thereunder, the Planning Board of the Village of Fayetteville, Onondaga County, New York is required to make a determination with respect to the environmental impact of any action to be taken by the involved village boards. And whereas the action contemplated is the development of property known as 547 East Genesee Street, tax map parcel number 009-04-19.1 by Millstone Development Group, LLC, with a proposed grocery store at 56,550 square feet, a senior facility at 42,750 square feet, and a commercial building at 3,500 square feet, as more thoroughly described in applicant's full environmental assessment form, which would require area variances related to building size, site plan review approval, issuance of a special permit, and subdivision approval. And whereas pursuant to seeker, the board desires to determine whether the action may have a significant adverse impact on the environment as defined by seeker, and whereas to aid the board in determining whether the action may have a significant adverse impact upon the environment, the board has reviewed a full environmental assessment form, a copy of which is on file at the office of the clerk of the village. And whereas the board has previously declared itself lead agency for this unlisted action under seeker with a coordinated review. And whereas the board and its representatives have consulted with various interested parties, viewed the site, reviewed documentation regarding the environmental impacts, including but not limited to those listed in Section F attached to the full environmental assessment form, Part 1, dated January 2021, as well as various submissions from interested parties and nearby property owners, and otherwise undertaken the requisite hard look with respect to the action. Now therefore be it resolved by the board as follows. Based upon the foregoing, an examination of the EAF and the criteria contained in 6 NYCRR section 617.7, the board makes the following determination with respect to the action. The action will have potential significant adverse impacts on the environment. As a consequence of the foregoing, the board hereby directs that a positive declaration is issued with respect to the action and the requirements of seeker shall be addressed for the application to continue. The clerk of the village is hereby directed to file the declaration with respect to the action in the office of the clerk in a file that will be readily accessible to the public. This resolution shall take effect immediately. Hopefully I read that right. So with respect to the applicant, I'll turn and face you now. I'm not reading. Thank you very much. We have issued our final or made our final decision with respect to seeker. I know that we have some steps ahead of us, and we will get together and understand what those steps are in terms of scoping and everything else. And we look forward to working with you throughout this process. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming tonight. I do think that that concludes our review of this application for tonight. And we do have some other items on our agenda that the board needs to take care of. So why don't we all take a moment pause and thank you applicants, Matt, Paul and Devin. Appreciate your time tonight, and we'll probably see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jane, it's Ted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think we referred to in that resolution, it referred to this being an unlisted action. I believe it was type 1.
Oh, yes, it is a type 1. I knew there was something. Okay. I'm sorry, I was just reading it so quickly. There it is right there.
Just so for the minutes, it's correct.
This is a type 1 action. Okay. We fixed that. Okay.
Thanks for catching that. That's the whole point.
Yeah. For reading it. All right. Ted, I will email this to you tonight after our meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, everybody. Thank you. I think our next steps in that particular case is that we will get together, and I don't really know what that means, but some of us will get together and we'll come up with scoping for the DEIS. And so we'll understand exactly what it is that the applicant needs to do for in completing an EIS. You know, some of the documentation has been provided, like the traffic assessment and that kind of thing. So we'll identify what's been done and what needs to be done. Okay.
I think they need to talk with their client and decide if they're even going to pursue this further.
Oh yeah, of course.
But if
Absolutely.
they do, I have some things in mind that when the time comes to suggest that they might look into at the scoping.
Okay, good.
I do as well, and I'm happy to be involved with any and all discussions about what the scoping should include.
Okie dokie. Alrighty, so I guess meeting minutes for December.
I'll move to approve.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Anything else on the agenda?
I think so.
No, not that I have.
I think it was just to confirm our March meeting, right?
Yep, the next first date is March 1st, is the first Monday. So if that works for everyone, that'll hold.
Yeah, I don't know. You guys going anywhere fun?
Oh, yeah. I was going to go run a marathon in another city.
Hey, Jennifer, you're going to be swimming a marathon soon.
That is probably more likely.
Yeah, no, Karen, I think we're all here. Much
I
to
think
our
so, too.
disappointment.
I was hoping to maybe leave the zip code. Maybe that's my plan for March.
Well, you can
Yeah.
sign in from almost any location. So who am I to say if you happen to be in a
Well,
warmer
maybe
climate?
I'll get to DeWitt.
So odds are we probably will be using the same format. So
I have to work on that, Jennifer. That's called leaving the zip code and you need help. All right, guys. Thank you very much for hanging in there. I think that we all stayed as methodical as we could tonight and just got our job done. So I appreciate everyone's attention. I thank all the attendees who are hanging in there with us as well. Someday we'll get to see all your faces in real person, in real time, right? Hopefully by the end of the year, but certainly not for the next couple of months. We'll still be on Zoom. Any thoughts or comments from
I
board
guess,
members?
Karen, if you can just save the questions that were in the Q&A so that if we ever get to site plan, we can address some of those concerns.
yeah, I
Actually-
will. I think there is a mechanism, so I will try to retrieve that
Thank you.
list of questions. But Jane, thank you for noticing that, and I think you touched upon what was most important for the moment.
Yeah, you're welcome, everybody. I'm reading some of the questions now. You can save these. Actually,
Yes.
I think I'm just going to take a screen. You know what?
Why not?
I'll let you do it. But go ahead, Dan.
I was gonna say just copy and paste.
Yeah, that's how you. If you can't get it saved through Zoom, which you should be able to, but you can copy and paste them. But I think Sarah has a really smart idea there because those are great questions. We just didn't have all the answers
Well, and
tonight.
I think they could also inform our discussions about the scoping.
Yeah.
So, yep, I will forward those to everyone.
Okay.